Hello again, welcome back to Legally Cited. This is BGFH, and I'm back here for kind of another one-off video. Earlier today, as I'm recording this, Apple did its yearly WWDC keynote online today. And normally, I wouldn't cover something like this, or I really didn't think that I would. But there were some things in this one, this year's in particular, that sound really kind of interesting to me. So I thought I would just kind of do a little video and talk about some of the things that could potentially be pretty interesting, or that I found particularly interesting, both from an accessibility standpoint and just from a user standpoint. They focused both on developers and the end user today, which is kind of another unique twist. And I figured, I was trying to find something interesting for you guys to look at while I'm blabbing, if you want to listen to me babble. And so I decided, let's load up a little bit of Gone Home. You may remember I covered this on my channel about a year ago or so, probably. And I figure I'm not going to play any of the story bits. I'm just going to wander around this virtual house because why not? So here we go. I've just done a little. There's a tweak that you can do, or some other options that you can do to like turn all the lights on or to unlock all the doors. And so I just basically chose to unlock all the doors so I could just freely wander around this ginormous house and explore while I babble. So, like I said, I really wasn't all that interested, or I really didn't think that I would cover the WWDC keynote because, there are some interesting things that typically come out of there, but nothing too earth-shattering, really. But this year I was sort of intrigued because there's just a lot of... Apple definitely seems to be changing somewhat. The big thing that I got from today's keynote was that Apple seems to be opening up a little bit. Now, they may have... A lot of the things that they talked about are probably things that could potentially... I don't know if I want to say anger is the right word, but could annoy some developers just because, they wrote a specific app that could do a certain task or that worked a certain way, and now Apple is just kind of taking that concept and running with it and making it their own, or implementing it basically in iOS or the Mac. And so they started by talking about, overall iOS and the Mac OS X, and they decided to call this one Yosemite. So Yosemite will be coming out later this fall, and it will be free, just like the last version or two of OS X. So we'll be moving on from Mavericks to Yosemite. And this part I wasn't super intrigued about. They focused a lot on little visual whiz-bang features. It kind of almost sounded like what they were talking about sounded like, hey, look, we've added Windows Aero, like transparency effects to the Mac operating system, which, as long as it doesn't, get too much in the way, I can live with it. The one tidbit that they kind of glazed over, and I really wish they would have at least showed more of it when they did their little live demo, was, I forget exactly what they called it, but it was like a dark mode, which they were kind of talking about people who were coding and that. This is a developers conference after all, and so they were talking about having a dark mode so that, people don't want all these, you don't want a whole bunch of white everywhere. They like a little dark backgrounds and things like that. At least that's what I really took it to mean, and that's what I hope it would be. And if they do that for OS X, I really, really hope they bring that to iOS 8, which I'll get into shortly. Because, as I've stated a number of times, and as you've probably heard from other people online, from countless different places, iOS 7 rubbed a few people the wrong way, especially the low vision stuff. A lot of light. It's really bright. Yeah, you could dim it down a little bit in iOS 7.1, but I would love not necessarily an inverted color scheme, because I don't want all the images to take effect, but like a dark, almost like a night mode that some apps have. I would love that in iOS 8, and I really hope, if they're thinking that along those lines for Yosemite, I really, really hope that they are doing the same or similar for iOS 8. As far as, like I said, I don't have a Mac personally. I have a MacBook that I use at work from time to time, and I'm learning it. I've been able to, I can get around the Mac, sort of, right now. The main thing for me is I don't know a lot of the, with Windows, I know pretty much a lot of the really quick shortcuts to, jump you to different places. Windows E to get to Windows Explorer, Windows R to run, Alt-Enter to go to properties, just little things like that, and other little shortcuts that make things a lot faster than having to go through the menu or the ribbon interface, that kind of thing. So I haven't got to that point on the Mac yet. So I can do everything, but I really do a lot of it through, like I said, the menus, and I've started using the Spotlight search, which comes in handy. But there you go. I'm not gonna, like I said, I'm not gonna concentrate too much on the Mac, because I don't really use it all that much to really know a lot of the difference. A lot of it was visual. They're making some tweaks to Safari, making it so that you can see more of the web page and not so much of the interface, kind of a tabs overview sort of thing. So you get little like thumbnail, like a grid of thumbnails that show you each of the tabs that you are open, which I do like. That I actually do kind of find that will be nice. Other than that, like I said, not being a Mac user really all that much, not a whole lot stood out to me. Now, a big thing that they did talk about was connectivity, and this will kind of lead me into iOS, because one of the things that they really seemed to talk a lot about was connectivity, and this being, there's a little bit of sharing through iCloud and a couple other odds and ends between iOS and the Mac. Now they're really trying to expand that so that basically, if you're on a home network and you have some sort of partnership set up between your devices, they can just sit there in the background and, without you doing anything, they know that each other are there. They just don't do anything until you open an app that says, hey, I want to transfer a file, or, oh, hey, I want to stream a video from here to there. But now they're kind of having this thing where the devices monitor what you are currently doing. So their big thing was like, oh, I could be doing an email, starting an email on my phone, and then, well, I actually get to my computer and I want to be able to resume right where I left off, because I have a full keyboard and it's going to be much easier for me to type and edit and send this email. So you can just bring up a little icon from the bottom and keep working right where you left off. So that's kind of neat. And it goes vice versa. You could go from your computer to your iPad, or your computer to your tablet, or your tablet to your phone, or vice versa. Any of those kind of combinations. And of course, you're probably going to have to be in the Apple ecosystem for this to work. You know, you're probably not going to be able to unless you do something really weird with iTunes or something. I'm guessing you're not going to be able to do that on the Windows side. So, you know, that's their whole trying to get you into their full-blown Apple ecosystem there. And oh my god, this place is dark. Where is the light? There we go. Just wandering around the house here, checking it out. And so that was their whole big thing. And they do that with like photos and emails and documents and all kinds of different things. And then they talked about like phone calls. So like, you know, if your phone is in the vicinity, you know, you can actually trigger a phone call from your computer, and it'll use your phone essentially to make the call through your computer, and you can get your messages, and if you get a call in your phone, it'll come up on your Mac. So I don't know, in some ways that could be kind of cool, but in some ways might be kind of annoying, because sometimes I maybe don't want that much connectivity. Maybe I just like, you know, just leave me alone. Basically the way I treat phones these days is that it's there for my convenience. If I want to call somebody, I will. I have a few friends that I will contact regularly, but aside from that, I don't like talking on the phone a whole lot. You know, I will make a call if I have to, or if I really want to. That's totally fine. But yeah, I don't know. That to me, that's just, I might be connected a little bit too much. So there you go. So now we move into iOS, which is really what I tuned into the keynote to see. And holy Lord, can anybody say dark? There's the light switch. There we go. Heading down to the basement here. So iOS really seems intriguing. There were quite a few things that they mentioned in the keynote, and then there were a few things that I discovered on Twitter that weren't specifically mentioned during the keynote that really caught my attention. So again, the theme that I saw this year was that Apple is not going to be quite so, I don't want to say closed-minded, but, you know, they're opening things up a lot. I heard the word third party a lot. Being able to share resources. So getting into that, one of the things that they're doing is that they're going to allow different apps to share information and tasks. So I could be in my regular camera app and decide, well, if I had an app that does some cool photo editing, I could be in my Photos app, pop out this little like sharing thing, and I could just use its custom controls without leaving the photo app, so that I could see the changes right there, right in my photo app without. And again, I can have basically, from what I understand, you can have one file in a certain location, and if the apps can share that between each other, I don't have to have 5 copies of the same file if I want to do different things in all of these apps, which was one of the things that drove me nuts about iOS in general, is the sandboxing. You know, it's like, okay, I've got a Word document in Mail, okay? Well, I want to make sure that I have it in my Dropbox, so I'll dump it over there. Well, then I'm gonna edit it in Pages, okay? Well, then I have I export it over to Pages. Well, now I've got 3 copies sitting on my device of the same file. Now when I edit it, the one that's in Pages, and therefore iCloud, will be updated. But then I have these older versions where if I forget about it and then I come back and want to load the file and then I go, oh crap, well no, this was in that location, and it's just a big mess. Not to mention, I'm hoping with these apps being able to share things, a lot of these accessible apps that I've covered on the channel and will continue to cover, I'm wondering if, being able to share some of these features, I wonder if we'll be able to share some speech synthesizers. So, you got Voice Dream, you've got Read to Go, you've got Blind Square, just to name a few. What if a TTS or text-to-speech company decided, okay, we are going to release Ivona, or we are going to release NeoSpeech, or whatever it happens to be. Acapella, pretty popular one that I like. So what if you had one of those, and then you could just download that app, which contains the voices that you want, and then you just tell whatever app you want, Bookshare, Voice Dream, all these ones that I've mentioned, what if you could have those use that app? That way, these voices take up, especially if somebody wants to have a number of different voices for different things, and you have several apps, again, that use voices other than the ones that are built into iOS. I don't know, I can't really think off the top of my head how many apps I have that have downloaded their own voices, but the thing is, I'm sure I've got several apps, and I've probably got at least a couple, if not a few gigs worth of data on my phone that is just taking up with redundant speech engines. So that's an example where if developers can use this type of technology efficiently, I'm wondering if some things like this will be possible. And that would make me very, very excited. While we're talking about voices, one of the things that I didn't hear in the keynote, but I saw on Twitter thereafter, is apparently that the accessibility features, I'm presuming VoiceOver is being a major one of these, is we're going to get the Alex voice that is on the Mac. So if people are complaining about they want better voices, or they're tired of Samantha, supposedly we're going to be getting the Alex voice, which is the default, really pretty human sounding voice that has been in OS 10 or OS X forever. And that could be interesting. I'm sort of skeptical, especially on older devices. I'm guessing you're gonna want some pretty beefy hardware. You're probably not gonna want to go lower than the iPhone 5 or some of the newer iPads, maybe the Air or the first or second generation Mini, because I have a sneaking feeling that while these new voices are going to be supported, I wonder how much processor power it's going to take, and I wonder if they're going to be as responsive as the more, traditional, more robotic Samantha voices. So that's something only time will tell. But just the fact that option is there, and maybe even if it is a little bit more, or a little bit less responsive, some people may sacrifice a little bit of that for the better quality voices. So, interested to see where that goes. One of the other really cool features that I'm glad to see coming is, again, opening things up again, following that trend. They're allowing third-party keyboards. So I've covered the Flexi app on my channel. I really like it, especially on the iPad, because I can lay it on my desk and I can actually pretty much touch type with 2 hands, and I can type pretty darn fast. So apparently you are going to be able to choose your third-party keyboards just like you do on Android, and then just use that as your default keyboard in iOS. So I've already seen confirmation on Twitter from Flexi, as I follow them, that they are indeed going to be supporting iOS 8 when it comes out, so that's pretty cool. Definitely going to give that a shot on my iPad for sure. Not sure about my phone. We'll see what happens there. As far as built-in keyboards, they're actually talking about, I forget exactly what they call it, but basically they're adding more word prediction. So instead of just relying simply on autocorrect, their default keyboard will, they were talking about how not only will it predict what you might want to say, but they'll do it in context, so it'll kind of monitor the way you do things and who you communicate with. So the example they gave is like if you are sending an email to a business colleague, you may talk in a more formal way. So your prediction may reflect that. Whereas if I'm just sending a quick message to my friend, you know, I could start the sentence the same way. I could say, today was, you know, and then if it was a business contact, I'd say, well, today was today was productive or whatever. And if I was emailing a friend, I'd say, today was horrible or today was crazy. So I don't know. That could be kind of neat, I guess. Might be kind of an interesting thing to see how that works. So that, I think, might be, depending on how I use Flexi and how well that works, I may try that on my iPhone, and I may just try that new, you know, combined with the way you do touch typing on the regular Apple keyboard now. If you have that word prediction and if it works halfway decently, maybe that would be another alternative or another way to do it. So that's pretty cool. We're supposed to get some magnifier enhancements, although I don't really know what that is. All I read was that there was some tweet that says there's going to have some better magnification. Maybe there'll be some font smoothing. That would be pretty awesome if they supported some font smoothing like Zoom Text and Magic do. Maybe even if they brought that, maybe they're even bringing that to OS 10. I don't know, but that could be pretty intriguing. The other thing that really caught my attention is that, you know, this being able to, like I said, this whole openness and sharing kind of thing, not just, you know, I'm going to share things with Twitter or Facebook, but being able to share files, share these different keyboards. There's a new service called iCloud Drive, which is kind of like Apple's beefed up iCloud, but it's Dropbox sort of thing. Now, I don't exactly understand how this works, but what I've read about it so far, the way I understand it is that you can use probably a built-in app or something, and then you can use, if I understand correctly, you'll be able to use this iCloud Drive as kind of like a central repository, and if an app supports that, you could say, okay, well, I want your default file location, I want you to point to, probably, you know, I could maybe point to Dropbox, or I could point to this iCloud Drive. And then, you know, like I said, you don't have to have separate copies of files everywhere. So I'm wondering how you will be able to get files to this cloud drive. I wonder if you have to use iTunes, or if there'll be a plugin where you can do it like Dropbox, where you just have a folder in Windows Explorer, let's say, and you can, you know, just put files in this certain folder, and then they will appear on any other device where you have that account set up. But potentially, and I don't want to speak too early, and I definitely want to read more about it, but potentially it may not be a one-to-one solution, like just plugging your device in like a thumb drive, or like you can with Android, but it may be a step on the way to at least having a location to be able to put files. Like like I said, when I was talking about this app sharing, one of the things is I would love to be able to just connect my iPad or my phone to my computer, go into Windows Explorer, grab files or even a folder structure that I've set up and I've been working on my computer, and maybe I want to I just want to copy that over to my phone, and even if it has to be in a certain folder, I'm okay with that. As long as apps can point to that location and use whatever data and hierarchy structure I put in, I would absolutely love that. So I like I said, I'm kind of waiting to hear more about this, but potentially this could be really pretty cool. So that is something to definitely look forward to, as far as depending on how good or bad it works. I will definitely be letting you guys know and covering that on the channel in some fashion in the future, because that has been one of my, I would say, largest pet peeves of the Apple operating system. I've gotten around a lot of it with things like Dropbox and being able to email myself files and things like that, but if I could do it a little bit more efficiently, that would be fantastic. While again, we're on this whole open topic, the other thing that really got me excited is Apple is actually finally opening up their camera API to third-party developers. So remember when I was talking to you guys about these CCTV apps or OCR apps? Remember that I said there's only so much they can do, because, okay, you are working in, obviously, the constraints of the speed of the device and the power and the megapixels and, the actual hardware of the camera, but you're also limited to the level of access, of software access, that Apple grants you to their actual camera. So there was only so much you could do. You couldn't actually control like how the hardware worked. So like I don't know exactly what you could and couldn't do, but from what I understand, like you couldn't have real control of like the contrast and just the way the actual hardware did things. But now you're going to be able to with third-party apps. And this is, like I said, this is a great thing, because if you're not having this extra layer of like, well, I can't control the camera this way, but I'm going to do it in software on top of everything else. If you have more low-level access to the camera, you are going to be able to, I think, speed up a lot more of the responsiveness for camera apps. So this is crucially important for some of these CCTV magnification apps, because one of the things that even the ones that I use on a regular basis, I use over 40. I've used iCam. I've covered them on the channel. There's another magnification app that I have not covered on the channel yet, because I literally just discovered it as I'm recording this late last week, and I'm going to cover it on the channel. It's called Magnificent, and so look forward to that. But one of the complaints that I have, even when they're good apps, I said depending on the hardware you have, even on my iPhone 5, you are going to get some blurriness or lag. There's a little bit of a hitch in the response time. So If you're moving fast because you're reading fast, you're not gonna get maybe the fluidity that you would get with a dedicated CCTV, from a traditional assistive technology manufacturer. But if you're given lower level access to the camera, this could be huge. Same thing with OCR. I can, as good as Text Grabber is right now, I sing its praises to everybody, because as far as a portable OCR app, Text Grabber is amazing. It works very, very well. You give them actual access to the camera, I'm thinking it's just going to get better. And on a similar note, right even before WWDC, and now after I heard the keynote, I understand why. I read a couple of tweets that said that later this summer or later this year, they're officially going to be announcing and maybe releasing a KNFB reader app. And I think that might be because a lot of the reason that they weren't doing it before was they weren't happy with the level of access that Apple gave them to their camera. Same thing, I wonder if we're going to hear anything from Ceratec with DocuScan, because remember, when you use DocuScan, you're scanning all of these documents, and you'll be able to access through the cloud through their SAMNet service or iBlink Radio probably. And if you can do that right through, if they have an iOS version of DocuScan, that could be pretty cool. Like I said, they're going to have, I think in my opinion, they're going to have to do a lot of work. To, especially if they charge more. If they charge more, for me anyway, these new apps are going to have to offer something really compelling over Text Grabber, because like I said, Text Grabber is actually really cheap. I think it's $4 or $5, and it actually does work really well. So I have a feeling, if anything, DocuScan won't cost that much, if anything, especially if you're a current Ceratec user. KNFB Reader, if it comes out, I would kind of suspect that's the one, and it may justifiably be so, but that's the one that's going to cost more money. But for me to really take interest, I'm going to have to see something pretty cool, pretty substantial, for me to really pay attention to that. So opening up the camera, I think, is going to be a big deal. They talked a lot at the end of the conference. When they started talking about iOS, they talked more about the end user features, which were interesting. Like I said, there was a lot of good stuff in there about the iCloud Drive. They're introducing the home automation stuff that people were kind of predicting, and that sounds like it's pretty cool. I'm not entirely sure of all the, how detailed it is going to be, but they did also do the whole health-based thing where it ties into different, like the Mayo Clinic and other providers and doctors, and keeping track of all your your health statistics that you want to in one place. They're doing all that kind of stuff. But oddly, the developers section was really interesting to me, because they're telling it to the developers from their point of view, but as an end user, having a basic understanding of what they're trying to tell the developers, I think those are where I think some of the really cool announcements came, because opening up your file sharing a little bit between apps, opening up the camera, allowing integrated third-party keyboards, all these different things. These are things that, when you talk to an Android user, these are the things that they say that they like Android for, because it's more open. I can customize my experience a little bit more. I can tweak the home screen. I can tweak what keyboard I want. I can tweak widgets and notification center. or notifications and all that kind of thing. Speaking of Notification Center, we're actually going to get widgets. So that I'm actually pretty interested in too, because I've never really liked the Apple weather because it just doesn't seem accurate. I go to look at the weather and it doesn't really give me enough information. Like, it doesn't tell me the wind, especially when I'm, up north here. I want to know what the wind speed is. I want to know what the wind chill is, especially in the winter time. It doesn't really tell me those types of things right off the bat in the Apple weather, and it just doesn't seem as accurate. So if I could find a third-party weather app that I really like that had a widget, and I could just either have it on my home screen, or I could have it in my notification center, maybe even on my lock screen, I would like that. But yeah, we're getting widgets, so a lot of people are going to be happy about that. The one of the downsides to all of this stuff that I've been talking about, this sharing and your phone and your computer being aware of each other, these notification widgets and things, my only concern, or one of my concerns, is that the battery life. I don't know, everyone seems to be on this race to make a device as thin as humanly possible. Pretty soon they're going to be marketing it as, and now it also functions as a razor blade because the thing is so damn thin that you can actually cut yourself. It's not getting quite that bad, but the iPod Touch is really thin, and it's like they're trying to make it thinner and thinner and thinner. And yeah, I like a nice thin, easy to hold device just as much as the next guy. But the thing is, there was really nothing wrong with even the thickness of, let's say, the iPhone 4S, which is a little bit thicker. I would rather have a little bit of extra chunk to my device and have a battery, because I'm thinking all these constant online and sharing and, fetch data, or, pulling data from the internet all the time, even more so, and pulling from other devices even more than we're doing now, that can only be good for battery life. So, yeah, all these features are great, but I'm a little bit concerned as to how much of a battery hog these are going to be. And like I said, if they keep trying to make these devices and keep these devices as thin as they are, unless we're coming up with some really miraculous breakthrough in battery technology, I'm a little bit concerned, about the level of battery life you're going to get for all these extra features. So, yeah, there is that. So, I think those are, a lot of the iOS and OS X or OS X features that they really covered. I know for a fact that I'm sure I missed one or two things, big things to some people. I really didn't get into a lot of the photo stuff. They did a lot of demoing for like the photo apps and albums and things like that. I don't use them a lot. I've taken a couple of photos with my phone, and as you know, I've done a few videos with my phone. So I use it a little bit, but not a whole lot. The whole, oh, look at this, is all shiny and it looks different and it's got a different look to it and it's transparent and yada yada. Yeah, that stuff is not super interesting to me, as long as the clarity level is good enough and we don't get a whole, blindingly white look like we had in iOS 7, or if we get a little bit more control over that, I'll be fine with it. But yeah, overall, I was actually pretty impressed with this year's WWDC keynote, because like I said, a lot of the things that people complain about in iOS, myself included to some degree. I mean, there are aspects of Android that I would absolutely love to use. I mean, I like its more open nature. I like that I can just connect the device to my computer and transfer stuff back and forth. I don't have to do everything all goofy. If I want to make a ringtone, I can just basically pull in a MP3 ringtone, copy it on there, and say, hey, use this file. You know, I don't have to do everything through some crazy software like iTunes. All that kind of stuff. But what I don't like as much about Android is that I personally think while accessibility has improved considerably in the last couple of years, especially since version 4.0, I'm just not quite ready to say that, yes, if you have a lot of patience, if you want to do some customizations and configuring and getting different launchers and all kinds of things, yeah, you can make the Android experience pretty cool. And you can do, a lot of it can be made rather accessible. But there's just, I have a Nexus 7. I have the second generation Nexus 7 tablet. And as much as I like some aspects of Android, I really do rely pretty heavily on accessibility features, especially speech. So voiceover on iOS and TalkBack on Android. And TalkBack, like I said, if you play with it enough and you get it the way you like it, it's workable. You can do quite a bit with it, but there's just this level of jankiness, for lack of a better word. It just doesn't seem as efficient enough. Like, I just want to get in there, I want to do what I want to do. I don't want to have to change this setting, change that setting, and then it might work the way I want it to. I just want to get my task done and get it done. So I think that Apple, under iOS, I think it does a better job as far as overall accessibility goes. It's more consistent in that aspect. So yeah, and especially if they announce, they didn't announce any new hardware at WWDC today, which I really didn't expect them to. If anything, I thought maybe they would say something about an Apple TV update. I think they just recently announced an upgrade or an update to their Mac Minis or MacBook Pros or something. I don't even remember. So that happened not too long ago, but if anything, I thought maybe there would be an Apple TV something or other, but I really didn't expect much in the way of hardware reveals today because, Worldwide Developers Conference, WWDC, it's about developers. It's about creating the actual apps and software. So, yeah, I really didn't expect much, if anything, in the way of hardware. That being said, what I was really curious about is, a little bit of the Mac stuff, but primarily iOS. So I think I'm quite pleased at what they announced. And if Apple does what all the rumors are pointing to later this year, I've been hearing maybe late August to a September-ish release. They're talking about two different upcoming iPhone models, whether they call it the iPhone 6 or whatever the heck they call it. They're talking about a 4.7-inch screen model coming out first, probably they're saying August right now, but don't hold me to any of these dates because nobody knows, everyone's just guessing. But there's starting to be some pretty solid evidence pointing to something like that. But the iPhone 5 right now is a 4-inch screen, going up from the 3.5 of the earlier ones. So the 5, the 5S, 5C are all 4-inch screens, but they're talking about a 4.7-inch screen first, and then shortly thereafter having an even bigger 5.5-inch model, or close to that size. I know a lot of people, I've listened to podcasts and stuff like that, especially in the blindness community. Checked into the Serotalk ones and a couple other ones here and there. And one of the general consensus I'm getting is everyone's like, no, don't make it bigger. Why would you want to make it bigger? It's too big, and da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, I mean, as long as they have choice, that's a valid thing. But as a low vision user, I can't be more excited, especially with their announcement of, they're going to, on the new devices, it's going to have a better camera. Combine that with the better speed of the device. Combine that with developers getting better access to the actual, low-level access to the camera. And I'm hoping within the next year or two, we're going to see some pretty, we got some pretty decent ones now, but I'm thinking we're going to get to see some pretty awesome magnifier / CCTV apps. So some of these traditional assistive technology vendors, I know some of you guys are worried already, and you may be given more of a reason to be so shortly, because with all this camera support, if they fix some of these Braille translation issues, I haven't heard anything about that, but I'm hoping, they went part way with iOS 7. If they could clean that up a little bit. They're doing these third-party keyboards, and in addition to one of the things I forgot to mention accessibility-wise, I mentioned that they're doing the Alex voice, but on the whole keyboards thing, even the software keyboards, apparently there's going to be a full 6-dot input keyboard on iOS 8 as well. And I just read that on Twitter very shortly before starting this video. So it doesn't seem like they've forgotten accessibility. It sounds like they're, I'm cautiously optimistic. Even with all the stuff they talked about in iOS 7, yeah, they broke a couple things, but they seem to fix it pretty quickly. I'm not too worried about accessibility right now, because they've actually done pretty well for us in the last few versions, at least since I've been using iOS. It actually has gotten better, so I'm pretty intrigued. So I'm just trying to think if there's any other major things that I missed, but like I said, just the whole open nature of everything that they talked about today, I'm surprisingly kind of intrigued to see what iOS 8 is going to be, and look forward to seeing some of these changes. I really hope, especially with this whole file system stuff, I'm hoping that makes productivity and being able to use and work with files much easier. With their iCloud Drive, I didn't mention that they are actually adjusting the pricing for the iCloud storage, and I believe it's like $20 for 99 cents a month, and what is it, like 200 gig or something for like $3 or $4, which is actually dirt cheap. I could see myself, especially if I can back up my actual full device, and if I can make better use of these file systems and be able to copy things back and forth the way I want to, especially when iOS 8 comes out, I could actually see myself paying that subscription fee, either one of those, for a lot more data and just be able to use my iPhone or iPad a lot better. So yeah, I really didn't think I would be having to talk about WWDC and all this iOS and Apple stuff today, but there you go. Rather surprised, pleasantly surprised at what I heard, and I'm just going to have to wait and see, how much of this is actually real and how much of it works as well as they say it's going to. I mean, I always, I never really get too excited when companies announce things like this because, they make it sound really great on stage or really great in ads, but, they say, oh, it works like this, it works like that, but then in real life, you find that, oh, well, it does work like that if you do it this way or if this scenario. Like some of the app sharing data, one of the things that I read on Twitter as a possibility was that the whole sharing data thing or sharing, features and data between apps was that when they were talking during their keynote, they had said like, okay, well, third-party apps are going to be able to share. Like I said, I can use the interface of one camera app in another camera app to do extra things that the original camera app doesn't do. And one of the things, so what I took that to mean is that third-party apps, if they were open and if they, could share things openly with other apps, I could do something in one third-party app and make use of another third-party app. But one of the things that I kind of caught on Twitter just recently was that they were talking about, yes, you can share features from different apps, but it's pulling in third-party features and third-party data from third-party apps into Apple apps, and maybe an Apple app into a third-party app, but I don't know. They may still be restricting, like you may not be able to go strictly third-party to third-party app. So there's a little bit of ambiguity there that, maybe they didn't tell us outright, or, that we're just assuming because of the way they presented things today. But again, we'll just have to wait and see because, the developer, if you are a developer and you want to have access to OS 10 or iOS 8, you can get the betas today. So, once people start playing with them, and I'm sure we'll hear a lot more, but those are the things that, like I said, I want to believe, I want to hope that these things are going to work the way I'm assuming them or the way I want them to work, but it may not be quite the case. But at least we're heading in the right direction. I mean, just having a lot of these, opening things up in general, even to some degree, is, I think, a huge step for Apple because they've been just so secretive, so closed off, so, our way or the highway kind of thing. And I think this is where we're really starting to see maybe a little bit of a change. So, and potentially, I think, for the better. So, that is my rambling on WWDC and Apple's stuff, especially if my Reflector app will support iOS 8 when it comes out. I will surely be covering that on the channel once I've had a chance to play with it. I'm not going to do the betas right now because I really want to just have my devices work. And of course with a beta, like I said, if you're interested in the beta, know that it's a beta. It's not production software. There are going to be bugs. You're probably going to get crashes. So, it's not just, oh, I want to play with iOS 8. There is some risk to it. So, take with that what you will. But when iOS 8 comes out, I will definitely be covering that on the channel and let you know what I think of it, good, bad, or otherwise. And yeah, and that was about perfect timing because I was able to pretty much walk around this house in Gone Home. Like, if you haven't watched the original Low Vision Spotlight for that, just check that out on the channel and you can figure out what this actual game is. But now you've actually gotten to see, more of what this house is. It kind of almost gave you the full tour with the exception of a few little rooms here and there. The full tour of this pretty cool looking house. So hope you guys enjoyed this video, and until next time, I will talk to you guys again later.